I am delighted to be here. This is a big dream for me to have the Maine community and the groups in Maine talk about economic democracy. It's a big deal. Thank you all for coming. It's a privilege and it's an honor to be here before you today. I want to acknowledge the folks I see in the room. There's practitioners of the new economy, representatives of people's movements, healthcare, food sovereignty, decentralized energy generation, cooperatives. All of you are deeply committed to community values and to a more just and sustainable world. Some of you serve at the intersection of social and economic justice activism and the new economy. You all and your work are very inspiring to me. We're all here today to share collectively and to discuss what economic democracy is and how we can apply it. Let me say a few things about myself, as I don't know you, most of you. I live and work in Booth Bay. I'm an electrician. My passion is for meditation, yoga, and working towards a better world. Over the last 6 or 7 years, I focused a lot on activism, primarily on social and economic justice movements and campaigns, and also challenging free trade agreements. 2 years ago, my partner Sri Vero and I founded the Alliance for Economic Democracy, and my activism shifted to embrace also the strategic goal of implementing systemic change, changing the economy for the better of all people in the world. So this view of economic democracy that I'm going to talk about is based on a reimagining of society as if everyone is connected. We are not in isolation from nature or from each other. Instead, we are in an intimate relationship with those beings we can see and those we cannot, and with the natural world of which we are a part. The heart of this work of organizing around economic democracy is in strengthening our social and economic fabric, our bonds with each other. We're seeking greater connections between all peoples to reduce the divisions, the apathy, tension, conflict, and misunderstanding. In this view, our economy is an extension of our community values. And this economy must become in alignment with our highest versions of those values. The move to center the needs, interests, and desires of local people, especially, is based on a sense of universal family extending to everybody. We all have rights and needs, and it's neither acceptable nor tolerable that some accumulate so much wealth that others are deprived of their basic needs. Economic democracy is a framework where communities and regions base decisions and policies upon collective needs rather than maximizing private profit. The great crises of our time, such as looming environmental collapse, the vast extinction of species, cannot be surmounted by individual efforts alone. A shift of consciousness must happen for us to collectively move toward the ideals of a democratic economy. We must consider our relationship with others and ask ourselves, where does our food come from? How are the animals treated? What are the effects on the soils and the waters? Are the practices of farming and agriculture part of the problem, causing environmental degradation, destruction, mass pollution? How can they be aligned with the renewable, regenerative economy? What types of products do we purchase? Are they part of the disposable, mass waste-producing, centralized economy? What are the working conditions and how fairly are the workers paid? What is the environmental impact of the distance supplies must travel to get to us? We need to take a real, honest look at the nature of global capitalism and how it produces such incredible environmental devastation. To overcome that, we need to establish and strengthen regional economies to be more self-reliant and relocalized so that they no longer depend on food and supplies shipped from thousands of miles away. Most of our retail goods come from what has to be called a slave labor sweatshop economy from Asia. Within the borders of the United States, we've outlawed the worst of such harsh exploitative conditions, and we've merely exported the problem elsewhere, out of sight and out of mind. We are taught to think that it is rational and prudent to invest our money and retirement funds in the stock market, with little thought of the impact that it has on community economies, especially the loss of that investment power that could be used in our communities. There are consequences to our ignorance. The modern industrial economy is dominated by large transnational corporations and extremely high net worth individuals, unconcerned with public health or the public good. Those entities focus exclusively on maximizing profits and wealth accumulation, rather than paying good wages, strengthening local communities and economies, and thereby supporting strong and dynamic political processes. We should be looking at what is the effect of our actions on an entire ecosystem of human, economic, socio-political relationships. When we are developing our economies, it shouldn't and it doesn't need to come at the expense of another's opportunity to live and thrive. Neither should we be causing needless harm to the environment. This reimagining is a movement towards economic democracy. It's a transformation of economic and political institutions as if the people and the planet matter for the welfare of all, with a focus on real human needs and bringing the power of decision-making back into the people's hands. Economic democracy is rooted in the notion that for the benefit of all people and the planet, the economy has to be democratized. But what does it mean to bring the ideas of democracy to the economy? The essence of the word democracy means the rule of the demos, the rule of the people. But what does an economy look like when it is of the people, by the people, for the people, without anyone left behind? A democracy is where people collectively have real sovereignty, and the important decisions in society reflect their real desires and needs. I would argue that this is only possible with a system that guarantees a democratic economy. That is a system of economic democracy. This is what our convergence today, what this conference is about. At the heart of it, there are 4 requirements, I would say, or 4 pillars essential to establishing economic democracy. These are really values. And the first is that all people have an economic and human right to have opportunities to live a dignified life. Necessities of food and water, shelter, healthcare, education, clothing, these have to be guaranteed. The second pillar is to improve the standard of living and quality for everyone so that everyone has the means to get these needs met, that there's an improving quality of life for everyone. Maybe not the super wealthy. Maybe we don't need to worry about them so much. The third pillar is that economic power must be in the hands of local people. For example, it should be local people who determine how best to utilize local resources. Lastly, the fourth pillar is using local resources to meet local needs to the extent possible and limiting the wealth leaving local economies. These ideas represent a new paradigm of how the economy functions. And basically that whatever production, economic production, labor, and markets can be local, they should be local. These requirements or pillars of economic democracy demonstrate a new set of values, and they show us a little bit of what we already know. Environmental destruction and poverty are completely unnecessary. We live in the most advanced and wealthy nation in the history of nations. And we have so many people who are just struggling to survive. Nearly half of the nation lives and has less than $400 in the bank. It doesn't have to be like this. It shouldn't be like this. There is a better way. It's no surprise that the communities that are most economically and socially oppressed are also the most disenfranchised. They are people of color, indigenous people, minority and vulnerable populations, people at the margins of society who often have no real voice in the decisions affecting their lives. You know, half of the people earning a minimum wage in Maine are people of color, and they make up only 5% of Maine's population. There are none for whom it is more important to have economic democracy than the most socially and economically impacted. It feels to me like so much of the work is still developing our community relations, our bonds, and being responsible for each other, our needs, and raising our voices, doing important work of self-reflection, and understanding the needs and voices of others, being quiet enough to listen and be in true solidarity with others and hearing their voices. These are some of the necessary ingredients for us to come together. Maybe then we can move together and live up to an ideal that economic democracy is the radical, audacious idea that all local stakeholders have a say in shaping their economy. It is the people who are most impacted who must be empowered to make critical decisions affecting their lives, especially economic decisions. And this is our community. And this is our economy. We, the people, have some work to do to come together and establish justice and fairness with each other. So what does this look like? Well, I think we all kind of have an idea of what this looks like. The democratic economy includes transition towns, the transition town movement, regional food systems, time banking and mutual aid networks, community and municipally owned and run decentralized power generation, sustainable and regenerative organic agriculture, community investment and development institutions. We can go on and on, right? The cooperative economy, including worker and consumer-owned cooperative enterprises, solidarity and local living economies, local credit unions, public banking, pro-worker, pro-wage, pro-family policies, business models that prioritize community and environment over profit and growth. Thank you all for coming. It's been my great pleasure to speak before you. Thanks.